Hello, everybody. My name is Jeremy. This is Red Means Recording. And today I'm going to walk you through how to tune your modular system. This may seem boring, and for some of you, it probably is, but it's one of those things that's come up a lot in conversation recently. And as a content creator, I'm always looking for a subject for content. And yeah, there's some little tricks here that you might not know. If you're just getting started, this could be helpful to you. Some of these oscillators are free running, meaning they're constantly putting out information. Some of them are in need of a trigger, meaning they will only play when you trigger them, like elements here. And some of them are kind of in between. So let's start with an easy one. Let's start off with the XPO here. The XPO is a pretty standard oscillator in terms of how it needs to be tuned. But we want to pick the right output. So one of the things that will trip up tuners is really complicated harmonics. And I'll show you what I mean in a little bit. I'm going to take the output from our data here. This is what we're going to be using for our first tuning session. So data is a multifunctional tool signal analyzer. It's a must-have if you can fit it in your rack and have the money. If you don't, we have other ways. Don't worry about it. I'm going to pick the triangle / sine wave output. That's a nice pure output that we can use for this. On our tuner here, you can see that it's actually pretty close to where we want it to be. What note do you tune your oscillators to? I personally tune all my oscillators to the note C. When I press C on my sequencer, I want C to come out of my oscillators. When I press G to come out of my sequencer, I want G to come out of my oscillators, and tuning to C will do that. So you don't have to tune to C. That's what I would recommend. With nothing going into the 1 volt per octave of your oscillator, in general, it should put out the note that its core is tuned to, in this case, C4. Where you might want to make a decision is what octave you're going to be working in, because there's a thing called pitch tracking. Let me show you what I mean. Let's take a 1 volt per octave signal out of my sequencer and put it into the volt per octave of the XPO. Well, you just heard something happen. A pitch drop happened. I was not expecting that. So C coming out of the Hermod is a little different. The voltage that feeds the XPO, the voltage that feeds the oscillator is a little different than what is just coming out of the XPO. That's fine. It's okay. We'll just work with this. Let's tune to C3. We're going to get C3 right in the middle. And by the way, if you don't know about volt per octave is the standard that all oscillators speak when it comes to tempered pitch in Eurorack. It means that an octave is represented over the course of a volt of voltage, and there are, I think, like 10 volts to choose from in Eurorack, so it gives us a wide range. But here's the issue. So let's tune this real quick. I'll get back into the mechanics of tuning in just a second. But the reason that you might want to pick a particular octave is because watch what happens to our tuner here as I switch between octaves. There's C1. Notice how C1 is a little flat, right? As I go towards C3, we're going to jump back into right where we put it. Now it's a tiny bit sharp. Just a tiny bit, right? So we'll get that right back in the middle there. And then we're going to go up. See how now we're getting sharper and sharper and sharper? That is because there's a thing in Eurorack called tracking, pitch tracking. Oscillators can track pitch over a certain range. And that range is going to differ in terms of accuracy per oscillator. But it's very rare that you're going to find an oscillator that tracks perfectly across all octaves. In fact, it's basically impossible. I don't think you're going to find one that does that. So you want to pick the octave that you want to work in. So if you want to make a bass voice, you might want to work, you want to tune that oscillator down towards like, C2 or something like that. If you want it to be more of a mid-range voice, then C3 or C4. And if it's going to be a trebly voice, maybe C4 or C5. Kind of put it in the middle of the octave range you're going to be working in. But do not expect your oscillator to track across all those octaves perfectly. You will get pitch differences, and it's going to vary pretty wildly per oscillator as to what that pitch drift is over time. So that's called tracking, and it's a thing. I'm just realizing we have a pure sine wave out here, which is even more perfect for tuning. Most oscillators have a coarse pitch, which is going to swing you around all of the range that you can access. Wow, right back on the money there. That's great. And then there's going to be a fine control, which usually goes a few semitones on either side. And if you're lucky, both will be nice knobs that respond well to your touch and stay where they're put. Things like the 4MS Ensemble oscillator, which maybe I'll move to next, it's hard to get it in the middle. It really is. So you're going to want to get your coarse pitch, coarse tuning, the big knob usually, as close as possible to the note that you want. And then use the fine tune to get it perfectly on that pitch. And now we are, perfectly in tune. If you only have like one tuner, you can now use this pitch to listen to other pitches and tune them like that. So let me explain what I mean by that. From Zephyr here, I'm going to pull a triangle out, put it into here, and we'll take this and put it to our input here. Now, if I turn on the tuning here, we'll see that we are C2 very close. Now the Zephyr is interesting because it has an octave knob. So this actually tracks really, really nicely. You'll notice that we're not seeing that drift that we saw a little bit, but nowhere near the drift that we saw with our friend the XPO. So if you have an octave knob on your oscillator, that's good stuff. The noise engineering oscillators also have a range on them, which is cool, very useful. So they actually won't go above or below a particular range when you're in low, mid, and high. So you can just switch them over to that, which I think is a great feature on oscillators. I wish more stuff had that. But what I want you to listen to now is the beating that's going to occur as I slowly take the Zephyr out of tune with the XPO, okay? You can already hear it. Whoa, 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 whoa. So here we're a full semitone and some change off. Let me now bring it back, and you're going to hear that beating start. It's going to go whoop, 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 and then it's eventually going to get pretty dead on. Oh, that is really close. Now, if you listen carefully in the high end, you can hear what almost sounds like a little flanging. You're just going to get a tiny, tiny bit of movement because the pitches aren't completely the same. Neither is the phase of the oscillators, and that's totally okay. We want that. That's part of the joy of this type of oscillator interaction. So you can listen for those beat frequencies. Let's change to a different waveform. Let's change to saw. So a little bit of detuning gives you that richness, which is actually kind of nice. Now we're sort of in respace territory. And there is a full semitone off. The Zephyr is another oscillator that's really pleasant to tune. It just seems to work really, really well because it has a coarse tuner mode and then a fine tune mode. So you're listening for that sort of jet airplane sound to lock in. Okay. So if you only have one tuner, like for instance, this new tuner from Korg, which we will now use. Oh man, that made my, everything sounds weird now that I was listening to that. I don't know about you. This is the new tuner from Korg. It is theoretically meant for synths. So let's take a look at how this works. I'll take this back to triangle, take this out like this, and let's go ahead and see what happens with this tuner. Now, this has a couple different modes. First of all, it's really cool looking, kind of 3D looking. Isn't that neat? This has 3 display modes. Let's see what happens with this one when I take it out of tune. So let's see. As we get closer, make sure you can see that further and further away. You see that little strobe thing kind of lock in. Now we're sharp of C. And now we're right on stop it. And let's see how close we are once we get back to data. And we're dead on. So I used to use a little Korg guitar tuner for my stuff, but this new one from Korg, the ST1K, which is for synthesizers, is great. Like, so if you just want to carry this around to your gigs, then you don't have to worry about having something like Data or like the O tool in your rack. We do have other tuners in here though. Let's switch over to the Solero Vero here, a very small little tuner from Noise Engineering. So this is a 3-channel strobe tuner, I believe. So let's see what happens as I start to take this away from C so you can see what that looks like. All right, so now it's moving a whole bunch and you'll see that this is flat here, right? So this is a sharp, this is a flat. We are moving to the left, so it's gonna get flat, more flat, more flat, more flat. It knows that I want to pick C as my note because if I hit choose note, you'll see that it's set to C. So it says, hey, get back up there. Now you're too high. This is what happens when you get too high. It goes sharp that way. So go right here. There we are. That's probably as close as I'm going to get. So this little friend you can throw into a rack. It's small and you can choose one of 3 channels and tune them. So the Solero Vero is a really, really good choice if you want a dedicated tuner in your rack. Let's talk about complex waveforms versus non-complex waveforms, all right? So I'm gonna take an output from, here's a simple example, the Instro Croon, all right? So the Instro Croon can do super saws, basically. You can see we're a tiny little bit flat, so let me go ahead and bring that up. Here's our fine control right here. So fine. Perfect. If I had this in like super saw mode, we'd have a problem. It's not really gonna know what the note is at all. Because, I mean, listen to it. Like, do you know what note that is? You don't. As I bring it closer and closer, it's gonna get better, but it's still not good here. You can see it's whipping all over the place. So what we really want is the purest, simplest waveform we can get out of that. Here's another example, 4MS ensemble oscillator. If I take this and put it in here with some of the random settings just set wherever, we're putting out a chord. That's not very useful, okay? So, first of all, we need to bring spread down. And you can see we're pretty close, but what if we had like this stuff up? See, it's pulling all these weird harmonics. So we want to bring all this stuff down, and you can see we're a tiny bit flat. Now, this is an oscillator that is a pain in the fucking ass to get tuned. I barely touched this knob and it already, there we go. There was some little flapping going on. This knob here is so fucking sensitive and I hate it so much. I generally do not like tuning the 4MS ensemble oscillator. What about something like the Piston Honda? These can have really complex wavetables coming out of it, like that. Let's get this all the way down here, bring this up to C3. You probably know what C3 sounds like at this point, don't you? Fine tune. There we go. All right, so this is a very chill waveform, but if I was to, like, that's probably not gonna be a great tuning note. I'm surprised it's actually still picking up on it. The upper harmonic is a lot stronger than lower harmonic. Let's see what Solero Vero does with this. It does not really know what's up. So, like, it thinks it's flat by a lot. Let's bring this all the way down, and I bet you this thing is going to chill out. Yep, there we go. So Data's a bit smarter than the Solero, just in this particular case. But that's an example of why you want to move away from rich harmonics. Elements is the worst at this. We'll get to that one last. Let's talk about things that need to be triggered, like surface here. So I'm going to take the left out of surface. I'm going to go ahead and take volt per octave out of our sequencer, and I'm going to take gate out of our sequencer because this thing doesn't make a sound until you trigger it. There we go. So we kind of lucked out, I'm surprised, with this voice here. It actually seems to be pulling it okay, but some of the voices in Surface are not going to work very well. That, for instance, I can't believe it's still pulling it. Let's try Solero Vero. Yeah, so even though we are in tune, the harmonics of this note here are confused, which is expected. There's the one I'd probably tune it with right there. That's a very pure sound. Especially if I get rid of that click. There, it's basically just a sine wave now. Let's get right there. Oh, beautiful. See, even this purely digital oscillator has issues with tracking. find the lowest harmonically content thing, the closest to a sine wave you can. Let's talk about elements. This and rings are very, very difficult to find the right place to tune. And I don't have a rings in here, but I will show you this. So the reason this is so difficult to tune is because this geometry knob right here. This can get really, really weird in terms of harmonics. There's no way to tune a note like that. Also, I don't know what all that clicking is. So we need to find a place for the geometry knob and all these knobs to work. And what I found is geometry should be probably around 11 or 1030. I'm going to turn dampening up so that we have a longer note. Now, what we want to do is pair this with an oscillator that we do know has a very rich fundamental. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, and this is something you can do if you want to like tune your system quickly, I'm going to take the CV and gate out of this channel, and I'm going to mult them with a buffered mult. This will allow me to pass gate and, more importantly, CV to multiple oscillators at once. So, volt per octave there, and gate here. And the reason I'm using a buffered mult is because you can get some voltage drops with unbuffered mults. So if you're ever trying to volt a 1 volt per octave signal, you want to use a buffered mult. We tuned our XPO very nicely, so let's go ahead and put volt per octave there. And then we'll take the triangle wave out, put it into here, and we now want to get that element signal to match up with our XPO in terms of how it sounds. We need to go down. We're at theoretically D sharp right now. I'll just zoom in on this so you can take a look at the settings. You'll notice that I'm not using any effects or anything like this for the whole time. This is what I do like before I even sit down and start patching. I'll make sure my oscillators are tuned. Not every single time. Sometimes I do it in situ, meaning while I'm like adding a new voice to the patch, but generally this will be something that I do before I get started, especially on like a system that I'm taking to a gig or something like that. Well, you know what I'm going to do now? I'm going to take all of these oscillators and mult them out with this here and see what they all sound like together at once. Why not? We're here, okay? Yeah! Let's get some modulation going. Why not? Yeah! Tuning oscillators for fun and profit. That's it, y'all. If you have any tips or tricks for tuning oscillators, things that you would like to add to the conversation, do so in the comments. Hope this has been useful to you, and thanks for watching. My name is Jeremy. This is Red Means Recording Modular.